Hey, what's up, guys? Jag from Jaggy Sports here, and it is April the 1st, 2022. Sorry, I have no April Fool's jokes. Um, usually I have a lot of jokes. A lot of people laugh. I'm funny. I'm just kidding. I got the worst jokes in the world. So the deal here is last night, March 31st, Philadelphia 76ers lost to the Detroit Pistons. And you'll see the clip. James Harden went 4 for 15, ended up with 18 points, and they lost. He was a -1 last night. And Doc Rivers, the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, went on record and said during that stretch, the bench didn't really miss shots, but James Harden missed the shots. So it was not in those words. Don't quote me wrong, or don't quote me, but it's pretty much what he said. So bottom line is, he is there's a little chemistry breakdown there, because 2 games ago, Joel Embiid, when they faced Milwaukee Bucks. Joel Embiid, after the game, post-conference or post-game, he basically said, taking a shot at Doc Rivers, saying the strategy was bad, blah 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 blah. You know, the age-old saying is, "Don't air your dirty laundry," right? And for a team to be successful, you have to keep that stuff intact in the group, not let it spill over in the media. That's not what happened here. And basically, it's now the media is all over the dirty laundry. So we'll see what happens, right? Like, they got to figure this thing out. I know Harden went 4 for 15, ended up with 18 points. And then I know the media is all on him about the 11 point where he went 2 for 11 versus Phoenix. But he did pretty good in the Milwaukee game, and nobody's talking about that. So at the end of the day, you know, don't let the media influence your head, saying that, oh, there's major concerns and whatnot, kind of thing. I get it, right? There's a lot of pressure on James Harden, but at the end of the day, they'll be able to figure it out, I think, and we'll move forward, right? We'll move forward as the playoffs come. All the teams like Boston, Philly, Nets, like, we're all gonna see what happens when it comes to this playoff push amongst those teams and the seedings. But you know, there's a lot in stake for James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. Last night, the media was all over it, and this morning, as you can see.
It's a game that's supposed to be a gimme, but it is not. Not because Joel Embiid didn't do his part. He had 37 and 15. Take a look.
Look, good players have moves. Great players have counter moves. That pump fake is a great counter for his mid-range. And look, he's aggressive and one of the best attacking the rim.
So he did his part. And so did Cade Cunningham, the #1 overall pick. He had 27.
He had 27, and he's really been exploding. You know, in March, he averaged about 23, 6, and 4, something like that. I mean, if he was healthy the entire season, you'd be talking more about him as Rookie of the Year potential. But look, when you make a mistake, they convert easily, the Detroit Pistons.
That mistake was made by James Harden on the other end, and that's really the story of this game. Harden shot 4 of 15 from the floor, 2 of 9 from 3. Pistons get the win, and listen to Doc Rivers after the game.
Well, they didn't struggle. You know, they didn't get a lot of shots, you know, in their defense. I think during that stretch, it was more James, than them. So, yeah, that's just a tough night.
Let's be clear. He was asked about the bench struggling, and he said, no, it wasn't the bench. It was mostly James. I'll give you the numbers again. He was 4 of 15, 2 of 9 from 3.
It wasn't just that, though, Janelle. I mean, he said that the bench didn't get a lot of shots.
Right.
So that goes, here's my thing. Doc Rivers is always real with you now. He'll tell you what's on his mind. He told you what was on his mind with Ben Simmons. he's telling you what's on his mind right now with James Harden. If you look at the last 6 games, James Harden has been horrendous down the stretch. And it turns into this, and everybody sits around and they watch the James
almost
Harden
like
show.
Houston ball.
Exactly.
Almost.
And that's not the way they need to play. And it minimizes how Joel Embiid should be on the floor.
Janae, if you're a Sixers fan this morning, as the gentleman named Hembo behind you is, how are we feeling about James Harden right this minute as we head into the playoffs?
I'm not feeling great just because in big matchups, you think that the Sixers after the trade would be winning these games, and this is what's going to be that championship piece. But I actually like what Coach Rivers did. You have to call him out. Because, you know, if you have one issue with James Harden, you know, he's been an MVP. He can get you 20 to 30 any night. It's what he does in the playoffs. And you almost risked it all to get him in the playoffs. You know, sort of start poking the bear and say this is important, because what we've seen is a season of Joel Embiid almost largely for most of the season be front runner for MVP. Capitalize on that with James Harden.
Here's what I will say, though. Does it feel like it might be setting something up? Because we all know who made that deal. Daryl Morey made that deal. Daryl Morey and James Harden are like this. If this thing goes south, I believe it is the coach and not James Harden who will be the one who's no longer there.
You know the difference between Milwaukee and Philly is? When I look at Giannis last night after he, won the scoring title for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they handed him the ball. My man didn't smile. He didn't cheer. It was like, yo, I got more I want to do. It feels like they're running towards the number 1 seed, and if they see Brooklyn, so be it.
As the defending champ running towards the number 1 seed.
Exactly. But when I look at Philly, it kind of feeds into that conspiracy theory, and I'm going to play into it. You lose to Detroit last night, Detroit with 6 games left to go in the season. Like, are you just trying to get out of the way of playing the Brooklyn Nets and not get that top seed? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it that I will admit I hadn't considered, because the 10 playoff teams in the East are set. How they're going to be aligned is, I mean, practically any combination of events could still take place over this last week and change. But Chiney, I will just ask you, as we sort of analyze the big teams in the Eastern Conference, where is Philly?
Philly is right in the middle of the pack. At one point, I thought that this trade would put them over the edge and make them real contenders, because if you look at the top, I mean, anyone could have been a top team in the East this year, which shows you the increased parity. But I think that they have to prove to themselves that they want to play. Joel Embiid has done that. He's answered the question. Now, I've always said the big, X factor is going to be the supporting cast, which includes James Harden wanting to play motivated basketball and make teammates better. If he took one lesson from Brooklyn, it's that he can be a capable passer. He can run an offense. I think he has to rely on that Brooklyn basketball, bring that to Philly, make sure he keeps Joel Embiid in that MVP mindset, and bring the best out of his teammates. And I think that's what Doc Rivers was trying to say. Hey, wake up, I'm watching you.
Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Boston, Miami. Is that at least 4 teams that we like better than Philly right now in the East Conference playoffs? Forget where they all wind up seated.
I might throw in Toronto in that exchange to a degree too.
Ooh.
I like the way Toronto defends.
And they're playing well as of late, yeah.
It's like that's where we're at.
Is Doc putting too much blame on Harden? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is all on James Harden. Because how do you judge stars in the NBA? Postseason and closing time, fourth quarters. The last 6 fourth quarters for James Harden, these numbers are not suitable for work. They're absolutely awful. He's 4 of 19. He's got 8 turnovers, plus minus a minus 31, Shanae. Is that a star? Is that a group, a franchise that's mortgaged everything, their future, and put a competitor in their own conference in position, not to be good, to be far and away elite in the Nets for years to come with the capital that they deliver that team, thinking James fixes you right away. James has to be a star just a clip below Joel Embiid, who's in that MVP conversation doing things we've never seen from a big. Is he doing that? Is James Harden delivering that? He's a ball stopper. He's not a good defender. And now you're seeing fractures in a locker room. The reason why I love the Bucks, they don't have any of that. We are days removed from Joel Embiid calling out Doc Rivers saying, hey, look, this is a rotation issue. Why am I not out there playing when we're getting the business from Giannis? A couple days later, Doc Rivers is calling out a guy shades of what happened before with Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons is no longer in a uniform. This is vintage Sixers stuff, and the problem is the guy that's in that locker room you hope will fix it alongside Joel Embiid is James Harden, and he ain't built for it, and that's the problem.
You know what? I don't think it's fair that we say he's not built for it, because this guy has been one of the most durable players, and I'll push back on, he is a star. James Harden is a star that has risked it all to change teams so that he can pursue a championship. And I think it was a big adjustment when he went to Brooklyn, and the biggest factor that we saw that was probably the best part of his game that he needs to tap into now was that he could lead the league in assists. Like, he can pass. He can make his teammates better. And that's sort of what he needs to remember in this moment. You can't shoot your way into success when you're playing with a teammate like Joel Embiid, who should be the focus. Because right now, that big man is balling. 37 and 15, even in a loss, that's the biggest frustrating point for me. You see someone that your running mate is trying to be MVP. If I'm playing with someone trying to be MVP, I'm trying to make you look great. I'm trying to win these games that matter. I'm trying to win games that, quote unquote, may not matter. If you think about the Detroit Pistons, like, that's a must-win game. Yeah. You should not lose that game, and you should not lose by my shooting. And I think that's what Doc Rivers is saying. He shot the ball. We're putting the ball in his hands. He wants to try to be the hero, because sometimes when you're playing ball, you feel like you can save it all with one possession. And then you have that, like, idea, like, all right, it didn't go well, so you, like, feel more and more. And I think that's a lot of pressure on James to try to create these solutions when he realizes that his solution is actually what you discovered by leaving Houston, passing the ball and making teammates better. So when I heard Doc Rivers call out James Harden, I was like, first of all, that man's tired, and that man is honest, because he realizes that the stakes are high for them. They risked it all to get James Harden. They realized that this is probably the best pick-and-roll duo you can have, with a center and an MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. And now you're losing games to the Detroit Pistons because our shooter's not making shots. You got to shout out the supporting cast, or realize, all right, it may not be my night. Let me get it to Joel, or let me get it to someone who can knock down the ball. So I looked to that soundbite. I was like, good. You guys need to let all that. I was going to say something nasty, like, the pimple pop. You need to get all that nastiness out of there. I know, that's the weirdest thing.
And you were looking at me when you said that. What's really good?
What's really good? So the reality is, my little sister is, like, trying to be into dermatology, so all my conversations with my little sister Erica is, like, all about that stuff. She loves Dr. Pimple Popper. But you want all of that mess to come out so you can have a clear surface and a better foundation. And I think that's exactly what we saw with Miami. Well, Miami, after their, after their altercation, will they get things together? After these losses, will Philly be able to get things together? It will really be intriguing to see if they can figure it out, because James Harden is forcing them to do it in the postseason and not the regular season.
Okay, and I'll say this. Look, Harden deserves some of the blame, yes. But, let's also look at Tyrese Maxey. When he arrived and the honeymoon season was going on in Philadelphia, we were looking at a big three in Philadelphia. That included Tyrese Maxey. These last three losses, Maxey has been terrible in situations where he needs to be good. And by the way, they're minus 39 with him on the floor and plus 19 with him off of it. He has not been able to produce or be that third guy, the third option for them to succeed. Now, I'm back to James Harden. He has played 4 horrendous games in Philadelphia. And if you compare that, he's only been there 6 weeks, really. Right. I mean, the rest of the stars in the NBA have probably had as many bad games as him in 6 weeks in Philadelphia. And, oh, by the way, let Harden do that in the postseason. Let him show up and not be there in the fourth quarter.
He's done that plenty of times before.
But right in Philadelphia? Oh, my God. They won't even be able to compose themselves in that city. Are you kidding me? Yeah. So Harden needs to figure this out quickly. Otherwise, we're going to have some very disgruntled people in Sixers Nation.
Christy, he's not the same guy anymore. Coming off the injury, he's still a star. Yeah. I mean, come on. I could never dream of doing the things he does with the basketball. But at the end of the day, I don't think he has what it takes to flip a narrative going into the postseason. And when you go into the postseason, I envision this is Game 6 of the Western Conference semis versus Spurs. Western Conference semis versus Golden State, when he went 2 of 12 from the three-point line? That's what I envision coming from him now, because he's not comfortable. He's not the same guy. And I think he feels that pressure, and that pressure is going to bust pipes.
I think a lot of people think the narrative when it comes to James Harden is, he doesn't show up in the postseason. But if you actually look at those years when he was in Houston, he had to do it all. And then there was an issue with running out of gas. When you look at Houston, you also see that they had a revolving door of stars to try to match his talent. I mean, I'm not that old, but there was Dwight Howard, and you had so many different iterations. You had Chris Paul, then you had Russell Westbrook. And then now he goes to Brooklyn, and he's a new guy. And we all know when you get to a new team, it's hard to find that identity. Now you're the new guy again. I can understand why James Harden, that postseason has evaded him, especially with how other teams are set up and how dominant other players have become. But I would say this is the year for him to figure it out, because this is the best post player he's ever played with. Joel Embiid and the season he's having right now, that is a blessing. And so if we're going to say this narrative should change, it should change this season, because you have a pick and roll partner where you should be allowed to cook. And so I'm reserving all judgment until what he does here in Philly, and then we'll see if that's his true narrative.
But you just laid them all out. It's like that Vince Vaughn line in a breakup. It's not the problem. He's the problem. Right. I mean, that's it. He's aligned himself with great opportunities. It hasn't resulted in anything.
So tell me what you guys' thoughts are. Is there a level of concern if you are a Philadelphia 76ers fan, even if you're not, right? Is there a level of concern for James Harden? Does he need to figure this out? Because I think he got 5 games left, and then you're in the playoff picture, right? I don't know who they're playing. At this point, if the playoffs started tomorrow, you'd be facing Chicago Bulls. DeMar DeRozan hit a 50-piece last night, and they beat the Clippers without Paul George, obviously. So, Clippers, I think, could have taken the Bulls if they had Paul George. But tell me what you guys' thoughts are, and let me know if you think there is a level of concern for James Harden. Is there a lot of pressure on James Harden? And I would love to know what the ceiling is for the 76ers now that they have a different team ever since the trade deadline, and the last 4 or 5 games are not so good, and particularly James Harden in the fourth quarter. You got to let me know what you guys' thoughts are, and will the 76ers make it past the first round? I'd love to know this. This is Jag from Jaggy Sports.